The dusty sun of late summer burned across the wide plains of Montana when Caleb Turner, a man known more for his silence than his words, walked through the noisy commotion of the county fair. People were laughing, drinking, showing off prized horses and cattle, but there was one sight that silenced the chatter: a young girl, barefoot, mud-streaked, her hair tangled like a horse's mane, locked in a crude wooden pen as if she were a wild animal, and the auctioneer's voice rang out above the crowd, calling her the wild girl, the one no man could tame. She had been found half-starved and wandering the wilderness after escaping a cruel life, and though most saw her as feral, Caleb saw something else in her eyes, something sharp and frightened but undeniably human. And when the bidding began, mostly drunken men wagering not for her freedom but for a spectacle, Caleb, steady and resolute, raised his hand and ended it with the highest bid. The laughter of the crowd mocked him, saying he'd wasted good money on nothing but trouble, but Caleb only placed his worn cowboy hat back on his head, stepped forward, and opened the pen without fear. The girl lunged as if to bite, her fists balled, her voice raw with growls instead of words, yet Caleb simply placed his coat around her shoulders, whispered gently, "You don't belong in a cage, darlin', not here, not ever." And with that one act of kindness he began a journey neither of them expected. The ranch was a lonely stretch of land where Caleb worked from dawn till dusk, raising cattle and fixing fences, but now it became a place of quiet transformation. At first the girl, whom the townsfolk kept calling wild, refused food, refused warmth, refused trust, crouching by the barn like a cornered animal, but Caleb never raised his voice, never forced her hand. He left bread and water on the steps, sat on the porch humming old songs his mother used to sing, letting her come near only when she chose, and day by day the invisible thread of patience drew her closer. One evening, when the stars spilled across the sky, she crept to the porch and sat cross-legged a few feet from him, silent, watching, and Caleb only nodded as though she'd been there all along, giving her space to learn that not every man carried cruelty. Weeks passed, and the girl began to reveal flickers of the person buried beneath the fear. She laughed one morning when a colt nuzzled her hand, a sound so pure it startled even herself. She spoke her first word in months, water, and Caleb, hearing her voice like a bell breaking through fog, felt a swell in his chest that no ranch hand's strength could measure. The townsfolk, however, were not so forgiving. They whispered in the saloon that Caleb had lost his mind, wasting his life on someone broken beyond repair, but Caleb kept tending both his land and her spirit, believing that kindness could mend what cruelty had shattered. One autumn afternoon, when a storm rolled in fierce and wild, the barn caught fire from a lightning strike, flames tearing through the roof, and while Caleb rushed to free the trapped animals, it was the girl who screamed his name, a name she had never spoken before, and pulled him out from the smoke when the roof caved in, her thin arms trembling but strong enough to save him. In that moment Caleb realized she was no longer the girl people mocked but a soul who had found her courage, and in saving him she had saved herself. After the fire, something changed. She began to speak more, to help with chores, to braid her tangled hair, and though she stumbled through words and ways of living, Caleb's steady presence guided her gently, teaching her how to ride, how to plant, how to read simple lines from an old Bible his mother left behind, and in return, she taught him laughter, taught him the richness of company he had long forgotten after years of solitude. The unexpected turn came one harsh winter when sickness swept through the town, leaving many families desperate and hungry. Caleb wanted to offer food and medicine, but supplies were short, and he faced the painful choice between keeping enough for the ranch or sharing with neighbors. Before he could decide, the girl, once caged and voiceless, stood before him with the basket of bread she had baked herself and said they needed more, her voice steady, her eyes no longer afraid but full of quiet strength, and together they loaded the wagon and delivered what they had to those in need, their generosity sparking others to do the same until the town weathered the storm of hunger not through wealth but through unity. That act of compassion transformed not only the girl but the way people saw her. No longer the wild one, she became known as Hope, for she had brought it into their lives as surely as she had into Caleb's. In the spring, when wildflowers bloomed across the hills and the ranch thrived anew, Caleb watched her run across the fields, hair streaming in the wind, laughter ringing like music, and he thought of the first time he saw her behind that cruel pen, small and broken, treated as less than human. He realized then that the truest strength a man could wield was not in taming but in loving, not in forcing but in freeing. And though he never sought reward, the gift he received was greater than any riches. He found family where he had only known solitude, and she found a home where she had only known fear. Their story spread quietly across the plains, not as a tale of a rancher who bought a wild girl, but of a man who believed in kindness and a girl who proved that every soul, no matter how scarred, can blossom when watered with patience and love. And so, under the endless Montana sky, two lives once broken by loss were mended by compassion, reminding all who heard their story that sometimes the greatest miracles are not found in grand gestures but in the simple act of seeing another human being as worthy of love. And that is how the rancher who bought the wild girl discovered she was never meant to be tamed at all, but to be cherished, and in walking into his heart, she found her freedom.